as has already been mentioned, it's kind of nice to see the sunshine today. We've needed a little bit of that, and it's good that we have it. You may have noticed in your bulletin that we're looking at the 84th Psalm today. There are so many Psalms that could be used for a message to us, a message of strength and challenge and so on. This one is one that stands out in my judgment. And I want to read it. I'm going to read it from the NRSV translation. I believe that's what you have on the screen. So you may want to follow on the screen or in your own Bible, but I hope you will pay close attention to what this psalm says to us. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of hosts. My soul longs, indeed it faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh sing for joy to the living God. Even the sparrow finds a home, and the swallow a nest for herself where she may lay her young. At your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. Happy are those who live in your house, ever singing your praise. Happy are those whose strength is in you, in whose heart are the highways to Zion. As they go through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. The early rain also covers it with pools. They go from strength to strength. The God of gods will be seen in Zion. O Lord of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob. Behold our shield, O God. Look on the face of your anointed. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than live in the tents of wickedness. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. He bestows favor and honor. No good thing does the Lord withhold from those who walk uprightly. O God of hosts, happy is everyone who trusts in you. During my years at Whitehall High School, you may never have heard of Whitehall High School because now it's North Green, but way back in antiquity, it was Whitehall High School. But in the high school, during the last 3 years that I spent there, we had a glee club. Some of you may not even recognize that term because it's probably called a chorus now, or choir, but it was called the glee club back in my days. Well, we had a director, Mrs. Barnett, Helen Barnett. She was a Christian lady, and she had a gift for selecting songs that not only were quality, both in their music and the message, but they were also fun to sing. And so I profited a great deal. But one such song that I vividly remember from those days, 70 years ago, disregard that. But one of the songs that I do remember from that had these words that came from the 84th Psalm. How lovely is thy dwelling, O Lord of hosts. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. For the sparrow has found her a place where she may lay her young. Even thine altar, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. What a beautiful picture. And it just reaches out for us as a place where worship takes place. And it is indeed a place like no other. And we may regard this place as one like no other. But in the psalm that describes the place of worship, there was nothing like it. King David, at one point in First Chronicles, said to his people, I had intended to build a permanent home for the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord and for the footstool of our God. I don't know exactly why David chose that word, but the place of worship as the footstool of God, the nearest reference that I can put together with that is that in the Holy of Holies, in that most sanctified of places, there was the Ark of the Covenant, a beautiful box about so long and about so wide and about so deep, overlaid with gold inside and out. And on top of that box was the golden mercy seat, as God called it. And as God described it to Moses earlier, he said, it is there that I will meet you. I will meet my people in that place. And it was a remarkable place, a place like no other. The temple was a place of unique beauty. I don't really fully understand the how or the why that God so described the process and how it was to be done, but it took tons of gold to build this temple, because it seems like that almost everything was covered with gold, not just the Ark of the Covenant and not just the mercy seat and the cherubim that sat on either end of that mercy seat, but on the side there were rings that were covered with gold. Rings so that the Ark of the Covenant could be carried with them as it was. And the poles that went through those rings to carry the Ark of the Covenant, they were covered with gold. There was gold everywhere. And then there was the massive curtain, the veil of the temple. There was a veil in that tabernacle, that tent that they carried with them in the wilderness. And then when Solomon built the temple that God wouldn't let David build, that veil of the temple, it was a huge curtain, about 4 inches thick with the various layers on it. It was embroidered in very meaningful colors, and it hung there. It was about 30 feet wide, maybe not quite as wide as this building, but close. And it was 45 feet tall. If you can imagine how awesome that curtain was, it was massive before your eyes, and the colors of it were impressive within themselves, and the heaviness of it was awesome within itself, But there it hung, 45 feet tall. And we're told by Josephus, who was the first century historian, that when Solomon's temple was replaced by Herod's temple, that curtain was made 60 feet tall. Beyond my imagination how that was done. But there hung that curtain, and behind it, that Ark of the Covenant in gold, a place like no other. Indeed it was. But there are other places of worship that just aren't that fancy. It was in March of 1954 that I went to the Pisgah Baptist Church just outside of Excelsior Springs, Missouri. I was in college, and I went that Sunday thinking they might be interested in having me serve them as pastor. But I remember my first Sunday arriving at that church. Here was this 100-year-old building, literally, situated right square in the middle of a cemetery. The old building it had not been, in fact for many, had been left vacant. There was no church activity. But a couple of years before I came on the scene, work had begun again, and so now they were starting to do some things in the building. But there it sat, two doors, originally one for men and one for women. Inside was nothing fancy, no gold whatsoever, and the pews, they weren't like this. They were obviously designed to keep people awake. They were about as uncomfortable as I think you could make them. On one side of the altar was a big stove. That's how we kept it warm in that building on those cold days. The platform went all the way across the front of the church, and in one corner, with the curtain around it, was the nursery. And they needed the nursery. So it was not exactly easy to get away from the sounds of the nursery. And that's okay. But it was there in that nursery behind that curtain that they hid me while they made a decision Sunday night in that small business meeting. But I want to tell you that it was a joy to worship in that old 100-year-old building with those people. They knew their God, and they worshiped their God, and they came together in the name of God and in the name of worship, and it was a joy for about 4 years to it with them. And I would not take anything for the experience. I gained a lot of insights about how where a few or many are gathered together in His name, it becomes a place like no other. But it's also a place of divine presence. The psalmist said, "My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God." We human beings are total people. Each one of us is a total person. And if we learn any anything from the ancient Hebrew people, we learn that when you deal with a person, you are dealing with them as a total person. They have a body, they have a mind, they have a spirit, they have a soul, and those are so linked together that I defy anybody to separate them apart. And the psalmist was saying that my heart and my flesh, all of me, cries out for the presence of the living God. When a person is dying of thirst, and I have not been in that kind of situation, maybe you have, but when a person is dying of thirst, all of their being, their mind, their soul, their body, all parts of that being come together and cry out for water. My heart and my soul and my flesh cry out for the living God. I like a quote from Gary Smith, a minister. He said, the fact that human beings all over the planet Earth intuitively worship something is proof that God has written this in our hearts. It is part of our spiritual genetics. And I believe this is true. But I want you also to realize with me that when we come and try to experience divine presence, divine acceptance is awfully important. In the Psalms, in two Psalms, one is in Psalm 13. The psalmist writes, how long will you hide your face from me? And there's so much particularly in the Old Testament about meeting God face to face, or seeking the face of God, or being willing for our face to be seen by God. There's something about how that links people together. And the psalmist said, how long will you hide your face from me? In Psalm 27, when you said, seek my face, my heart said to you, your face, O Lord, I shall seek. Do not hide your face from me. It is an awesome thing to meet with God. A place like no other is a place where we meet with God and seek his face. I believe in 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people, which are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, I will be with them. Jacob, you'll remember, he had, I don't know if he had eaten something that upset him, but he had a bad dream one night, or a good dream, however you want to view it. Because as he lay his head down on a rock pillow, he had a dream about angels ascending and descending on a ladder to heaven. And maybe there was a lot about that he didn't understand, but there were some things he did understand. And he said, as we look in Genesis 28, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. He was afraid. Jacob was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven, and he named it Bethel. It's an awesome thing to be in the presence of the living God. But it was also a place of incredible security. The song of the sparrows, somebody has said, was the song of adoration. When you talk about the sparrows, you can't find a much more worthless bird in God's kingdom. The sparrow had no particular value. But in this, the sparrow has a prime role, because the sparrow hath found her a place where she may lay her young. And the thing that seemed to really catch the attention of the psalmist was that place was the altar of the living God. And this worthless sparrow had found it a place of security, a place of safety, a place where she could make life continue. Another writer has said, what the nest meant to the sparrow, the Lord and his temple meant to the psalmist. To the psalmist, this was a place of sanctuary, a place of security. And the chirping of the sparrows probably, in all likelihood, sounded very much like the adoration of one of God's created creatures, celebrating the presence of the living God. There's something to be said about sanctuary. And I don't know exactly where I first heard that word, but I came to recognize that sanctuary was what we call part, at least, of our places of worship. And so when somebody refers to this auditorium as sanctuary, it's not inappropriate at all. It's very appropriate. But that certainly applied to the tent that the Israelites carried about through the wilderness, their tent of worship. But then it also applied to the temple, and it represents the most sacred part of a place of worship, a religious facility, especially the part where the altar is found. The term sanctuary was first known about the 14th century, so it's been around a long time. But it also has become known as a place of refuge. You may hear it talked about today. For many people, there are cities of refuge. Whether you agree or disagree with how those may be handled, that comes in the category of finding a safe place. It also, in England, became known as a sanctuary in churches and church lords, or churchyards rather. And in those days, a person could find sanctuary in those churches and in those churchyards for up to 4 days. And it was a place of safety. But we're not in England, and we're not in the 13th century, but we are here today. And what kind of sanctuary do we find in the name of our living God in this place like no other? A place to feel assurance and divine forgiveness that we've claimed. A place for nurturing fractured relationships. A place for sharing the blessings of faith and trust. A place to sense the direction of the Holy Spirit. A place to find the valley of Baca. And you read that in this 84th Psalm, and it's a little bit cloudy as to what the valley of Baca was really about. But it seems that it was a valley where at certain times during the year it was like a desert, extremely dry. And the psalmist seems to be saying that when you go through that desert time, there will be pools of water. There will be springs that you will find refreshing for your soul. And then it says to go from strength to strength. I don't know exactly how the psalmist may have intended that, but it seems as though the psalmist may have been saying, you will go from human strength to divine strength. Or you will go from a level of strength that seems to get you through this time on to another level of strength that will get you through another time. And the beauty about the strength to strength idea is that God gives us the strength today that we need today. It doesn't come yesterday perhaps, and doesn't come too late tomorrow, but comes today. And that's the nature of God's sanctuary. But it was also a place of joyous service. How blessed are those who dwell in the house of God. Now that's not talking about, it wasn't talking then about people moving in all their furnishings and living in the temple or on the temple compound. No, that's not what that was about. He was talking about people whose lives are affected on a daily basis by what they've gained from being in that place like no other. And so we know that for the psalmist there was great joy in serving at the door of the temple, a doorkeeper. Again, we're not exactly clear about what all it might mean, but one of the things it might have meant as people came with their dusty feet, there might have been somebody at the door to wash those dusty feet. And he said, that's okay with me. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God. In the Church of Jesus Christ, there's always something that needs to be done. And many of you, if not all of you, have stepped up and have done and continue to do those things that need to be done. But there are some who tackle some of the remarkably big tasks that are involved in helping and serving other people. I came to realize a few years ago that one of those places is Camp Barnabas. I don't know if you've ever heard of Camp Barnabas. It's located in southwest Missouri. And it is described, and I quote, as a Christian special needs summer camp. And its mission is to provide a unique Christian camping experience to people with special needs and chronic illnesses. Every year, for several years now, several young people from Central Baptist, the church where Della and I are members, have gone to Camp Barnabas to serve for a week. Sometimes they've stayed for a second week. But they're as healthy campers who come to be helpers. They take on the responsibility of being a caregiver to one of those young people who has a chronic condition. They may be paralyzed, they may be crippled, they may be in a wheelchair, they may be on crutches. There are all kinds of possibilities, but that's what they sign up for. And when they come back, as I have heard them speak, they talk about being excited to help. And it's work, hard work. But they also spoke of how everyone was so happy, even the caregivers, not just those who were ministered to. And as I have kind of processed some of that information, I find that it takes me a little further. In my life, having had to clean up after a 2-year-old who tried to feed himself, I know more than I want to know about what they do in a place like that. Or if there is a young man or a young lady who cannot take care of themselves in the bathroom, it's this caregiver that steps in to help. These young people have learned more about humble, caring service at Camp Barnabas than they might ever have learned in life otherwise. In Psalm 84, verse 10, I'm reading a translation from the Message for this particular verse in closing. One day spent in your house, this beautiful place of worship, beats thousands spent on Greek island beaches. I'd rather scrub floors in the house of my God than be honored as a guest in the palace of sin. I'd rather be a doorkeeper, a place like no other. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for your blessings to us today and for giving us the psalmist's story about a place that is so special, that is like no other. Help us to know that today in this place, this can be likewise a place like no other. Bless and guide us, we pray in Christ's name. Amen. We're going to sing the hymn that's shown there, Just a Closer Walk with Thee. And in a moment I'll ask you to stand. And as you do, I'm going to suggest something that is not meant to in any way offend. But I'm going to ask Steve and Vicki to just kind of stand at the end of the pew. If during this song you would like to come down and give them a hug, shake their hand, whisper a word of encouragement, whatever. I know that they are on the hearts of all of us. you to